I am frequently astounded by the way people treat one another. I am deeply concerned by our inability as a species to appreciate others and recognize that under our skin we are all the same. The level of treatment and discourse has deteriorated in our country, and I struggle with why we can't live peacefully with each other here and abroad and respect individual differences. How do we love? How do we learn to love? How do we learn to hate? I see these as integral questions to humanity if we can try to find a way towards living in peace with one another. What is clear to me is that we need to change and teach our youth to love the differences in one another. Just as Rotary is using education to change our world for the better, through the support for youth at risk, the ADL is changing the world through their No Place for Hate initiative and anti-bias education program for K-12 schools. I am so fortunate to know Tara and also consider her a friend, to know her in her capacity as the Director of Education at the Anti-Defamation League. Tara has over 15 years experience working with K-12 higher ed with a focus on school systemic change, anti-bias education, and student leadership. She has worked across the country in cities that include Philadelphia, Chicago, Portland, and Denver. She has a Bachelor of Arts in African and African American Studies and Political Science from Washington University in St. Louis and a Master's in Social Work from the University of Pennsylvania. Please welcome Tara. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Oh, we can do better. Good afternoon. Excellent. As an educator, it is hard when I don't get that response, and so I'm excited to be here, and really thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it very much, and because your agenda is remarkably succinct, I am going to set my timer to ensure I am the same way. Okay, here we go. Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation from Melinda, and it's been lovely to hear and get to know Andre, and I'm even more excited about JB's experience in Brazil. And that kind of experience and sharing and learning is hopefully what we try and do for students that aren't able to go to Brazil, aren't able to do that, but can create that kind of connection with each other. So I'm going to start. Many of you, I am certain, have heard of the ADL, of the Anti-Defamation League. With a show of hands, how many have heard of the ADL? This is great. And I know some of you, I think someone shared with me, that often you may know the good, the bad, or the ugly, which is fine. ADL definitely has its opinions because it's been around for a very long time. How many? Because I'm an educator, I'm going to try and ask you questions, see if you know the answers, and see how we can make this a little interactive. Does anyone know how old the ADL is? Melinda doesn't count. She counts, but she doesn't count for this because she knows the answer. Yes. All right, let me see if I do this correctly. Great. The ADL is one of the oldest civil rights human relations organizations in the country. It started in 1913 in Chicago by a group of lawyers, Jewish lawyers. It's a Jewish organization and still is today. And it has this mission statement, and it's been the same mission statement from even 1913 to as it is today, which is to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment for all. And what's brilliant for all of us that work with the organization now, I've been with the organization about 10 years and connected since 1995 with the organization, is that they understood at the turn of the century that they couldn't just work for justice for their own people, that they understood the connection of all people, and that if you stand up for yourself, you also have to stand up for others. This idea of collaboration, coalition, and allies was critical to the beginning of the organization. We are headquartered in New York City, but there are 28 offices in the U.S. and abroad. I'm just going to keep up with myself here. The Denver office is located just a few blocks from here and is one of the oldest offices in the country. It is over 70 years old. So we've been working here in Colorado and Wyoming for quite some time and are quite proud of that history. And Melinda's family is a real big part of that history here in Colorado. So we're very happy to continue the work and continue to work in coalition with lots of organizations around many, many issues. So if you ever go to ADL's website, we do a lot of stuff. There's a lot happening out in the world. And so I'm going to talk just briefly about some of these things. But my work really is in the education field. And though I'm the education director, my department is as big as you see the person standing here in front of you. I am the education department in our office. So I may talk about the division, which is in New York, but here in Colorado, I am that person. Civil rights has been a part of the organization for a very, very long time. We continue to work in a really robust way as we did 50 and 60 years ago. We're strong believers of the separation of church and state and work with individuals and organizations in a variety of different ways around those issues. ADL is also, one thing I will say is we don't litigate. We aren't the ACLU. But we are friends of the court around issues that are pertinent to our mission and to our values. The ADL is the largest non-governmental agency to train law enforcement on issues of counterterrorism, hate crimes, anti-bias policing, and extremist groups, far left and far right. And we do monitor those organizations online and in person. But I get to do the really good, fun, interesting work, the best work, the preventative work, the proactive work with schools, educators, bus drivers, lunchroom workers, everyone in any kind of K-12 arena, as well as on campuses and universities and community organizations. Okay, so in our division, in the education division, these are our three main areas that we focus on. Anti-bias education, which includes bully prevention and those kinds of issues, which I'll get to in just a moment. But really, this kind of work in schools started in the mid-'80s. So for a 100-year-old organization, we, the education, we call ourselves the teenagers a bit within the organization, just because we're newer to this part of the work. Holocaust education and remembrance is a big deal. We provide lots of resources, primary source documents for educators that are working with students to teach this history and have it connect to how it connect to today. And the Quiet Family has been a great, great, generous sponsor. And we take 10 students, juniors in high school, to Washington, D.C., and we use the backdrop of the Holocaust Memorial Museum to teach these lessons around how we treat each other, what it looked like then, and what it looks like today. And also issues around confronting anti-Semitism globally as well as domestically. All right. So our education work, let's see if this will work. Oh. Those three parts of our education work are critical, but every region in our country provides programming as best suits their community or their state, right? Or the issues that are important to them. But almost every single region does anti-bias education in their schools in some form. So I'm going to pause for a minute and ask you to participate with me in something at your tables, because that's what educators do. I'm going to make you work a little bit, because it's easier for me to show you how we do our work versus just talking and telling you how we do our work. So this is what I'd like you to do. We might have to bring up the lights just slightly so people can see each other. What I'd like you to do is at your tables, I don't see anybody sitting by themselves, is to find a partner. I would like you to find someone that you can pair up with. Go. It's very easy. Someone sitting next to you. If there's an odd number, look to the table next to you. Say hello. Okay, so do we have pairs? Mostly? 3. We can work that. We can work with the 3. Anybody else that does not have a pair? Okay, you're our sole 3 group over here. What I'd like to do is someone needs to be designated person A and someone needs to be designated person B. And we'll have an observer. The third person over here will be the observer. Okay, great. Thank you. Person B, with your dominant fist, with your dominant hand, please make a fist. Excellent. Person A, you have approximately 60 seconds to open that fist. Ready, set, go.
That was perfect.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Excellent. That was far less than 60 seconds, but that works. So let me find out how many were successful. Oh, okay. Some. All right, so I'm going to talk to the unsuccessful folks first. Okay? What strategies did you use to try and open that fist? Anyone? Tickles. Good one. I didn't see too much brute force because you guys are everyone's very nice, but... Oh, bribery. Clearly, because you were the unsuccessful group, it did not work. Okay. Oh, it worked. Okay. For those that were unsuccessful, so usually force, tickling often helps. Humor, bribery, deception. Oh, good one. Any others? Terror, is that what I heard? Oh, that's different from brute force. Okay. For those that were successful, bribery worked here. Okay. What was the other? Okay. Someone asked. Oh, so thoughtful. Asking. Any other strategies? Cooperation. Here in the back. Smooth touch. I love it. Shook your hand and you fell for it. No, I'm just kidding. Say that again. Manners. Nice manners. Please. You asked please. Again. Amazing, right? Surprising. I do this activity, so thank you for participating. I appreciate it, everybody, because that is how the ADL conducts its education work. We ask and say, please, consider these ideas. Share with us what you've learned, what your experiences are about. Tell us, and let's think about where we can find similarities and where there are real differences, and how do we learn from that. We don't do our education work by brute force or terror. It is about creating conversation and exchanging ideas. When we can't travel abroad, we try and create those spaces for students and for teachers and educators and principals to create that common ground, creating that community language in such a way so we can learn how to find that we have different perspectives on different issues. That is how we create our spaces and do our education work around bias, stereotypes, prejudice, discrimination, and bully prevention, is by asking and trying to create that open space so everyone can be included in that space, right? And because everyone has an experience in some form, whether it's your own kindergarten through 5th grade, middle school, which is often a lovely time for students, or high school, right? Let alone secondary and graduate school and all those other experiences that you all share in different neighborhoods, towns, states, wherever you have lived. So that is how we create and do our education work here in Colorado, Wyoming, and across the country. We have a belief Often people ask, why is the ADL a civil rights organization in bully prevention work? And we answer and say to that often what we find is the most challenging incidences, the most serious incidences of bullying, not all, because what we know is not all conflict is bullying, right? But what we do know is that the most severe incidents of bullying often are based on identity, based on race, based on ethnicity, based on religion, based on sexual orientation, that students are targeted for these things. And those things are what's important for us. Not all, but often. The most serious incidents of bullying are based on these issues. And we want to ensure that students are safe. All students are safe. Because what do we know? If you're not worried about getting from class to class, getting in the hallway, or what's going to happen in the lunchroom or the recess, if you don't have to worry about that, about your own safety, or you're not going to hear horrible kinds of things in the hallway, that you probably can learn a little bit better. And teachers can focus on teaching a little bit easier. So our concern and our interest is that these bottom levels of our pyramid of hate, and I know the writing here is quite small, so hopefully most schools hopefully have ways to deal with graffiti or incidents of physical violence, perhaps. But what we find is that most schools don't know how to deal with the things in the hallways, some of those little bits of teasing and taunting that often can escalate. And what we're asking schools to do is to think about it, to think about the small stuff. How do you create culture? Think about your workplace culture. We're asking schools to be really intentional. How do we want to create a safe, respectful space in and for our schools, for our parents and families, and for our teachers and educators, and for any visitors that might come into the building? How do we do that? And let's think about it and be purposeful about it. Because what we know for the most horrible incidences in the history of the world didn't start at the top. What we know is most of those things started at the bottom and built up. So we do ask schools to sweat the small stuff. Our No Place for Hate campaign and our World of Difference Institute, which are two of our anti-bias education programs, have reached many, many students and many, many schools. We're quite proud of it. The No Place for Hate campaign here in Colorado was really piloted in 2007 and 2008 and launched in 2008 and 2009 with 20 schools. And we work with about 50 to 55 schools in Colorado and Wyoming. And we ask schools for a year-long commitment. Many schools, and many of you have all probably experienced those days of just say no. Those were my days. Sort of the just say no to drugs. It was one big day, one big assembly, and that was it. And often now we hear of schools, which can be helpful, big assemblies that say be kind, do all those things, which is lovely. But we are asking schools to do more. We're asking them to revisit these kinds of issues around bias, bully prevention, and those kinds of things on a more regular basis. So we provide a framework and ask them to complete certain steps to do that. We've reached over the last 8 years or so over 250,000 students, elementary to high school in many, many different cities. I can see an extra comma in my list here. Sorry about that. And all over the state. This framework for schools is critical because often when they've done those day-long trainings for a certain group of students that dive a little deeper, that create that conversation, it ends there. And that's all. And those 30, 40, 50, 60 students in a school of 1,500 students ends with those kids. So this framework really says to those students and those educators, what now? What next? How are you going to take this to your building? Well, how are you going to engage in creating that kind of culture and space for conversation around current issues at the high school level? And also students. How do you break down barriers between groups? We all know There is all sorts of groups that form in schools. How do we get them just to talk to each other and respect each other? Right? Not everyone's going to like each other. Not everyone's going to play together. But we do need to create safe spaces so students have that space to learn and not worry about their own safety and feeling connected and welcome to those in their building. So that's the goals of the ADL, and particularly of No Place for Hate. I think I did really great with time, by the way. I will, since I have some time, I'm going to show you one thing. Recently, a school of ours in Colorado Springs, Rampart High School, who has been partnering with us for 6 years. And I say that because creating culture or trying to change a culture in a school takes time. It does not happen in a semester, and it doesn't happen in a year. When you get students, right, changing, teachers, leadership, that changes. It takes work. These students that were part of the No Place for Hate coalition, if you can pause, thanks, decided they needed a way to create conversation with their fellow 1,500 classmates. And so those students they have a TV station at Rampart High School, and they created a way and got their TV video, I don't know his name, his title, that teaches that class, and those students that are part of that, and said, can we create something? So these students wrote, scripted, edited, acted 4 public service announcements. And they really used them and showed them their entire school building to create conversations. What are we doing? How are we speaking to each other? What does this look like at Rampart High School? Okay, so I'm going to show you one of them because I did so great with time. So I'm going to show you one of them. And we're quite proud that these students did this on their own and said, we want to create something for our school in a way that helps us engage each other.
You would never do this in real life. So why is it okay here? Stand against bullying, Rampart.
Thank you so much for your time. I very much appreciate your attention and lunch. So thank you again.
We've got time for a couple of questions. So are there any questions from the audience for Tara?
Hi. Hello. Yes. Oh, I appreciate that. Well, I have lots. We do teacher, we do lots of, so I'm going to speak in the school setting. We do lots of teacher professional development when they have the time, right? And the resources and the energy, because there's a lot of demand, and that has shifted over time. So we do those programs. and can. We also do it with community organizations, nonprofits, whoever sort of asks. We do some workplace work as well. So it all lives. It's really just by request. And it can be customized for the issues at the place, at the site. And the length of time is really dependent on what people are willing to give. Right? People's time is precious. So often it's dictated not by us, per se. And it takes time. It's a process. Change is not easy. And unlearning some of what we've learned or experienced to just sort of be open to those kinds of conversations isn't always easy. And adults, all of us adults, often don't want to talk about those challenging experiences and personal things. So I actually really enjoy working with adults. So I think that they're great conversations to be had. But yes, we do all of those things. I saw a hand here, and then I'll come back here.
So quick question. I work at a homeless shelter.
Okay,
I'm here. Hi.
Okay.
I work at a homeless shelter, and across the country, this is a real number, 40% of every homeless youth in our country is homeless because they've gender identified as LGBTQ and have been asked by their parents to leave their home. What is ADL doing, if anything, along the lines of family unification? Because frankly, here in Colorado, we have tons of LGBTQ kids coming to our shelter.
Yes. So thank you for sharing that, because it is a big, significant deal. We really work with schools to find out what those schools and how that is just the systems in which we work, and that is sort of how we've been able to deliver our programming. If it is useful to work and connect with staff or educators at this homeless shelter to create conversations, we can do that. We don't do family reunification kinds of work. We do have significant conversations at the middle school and high school level to find out if they have gay-straight alliances, those kinds of supports for students, and if the staff there have the language and are able to talk about it. In some of our districts, they don't. And so we try and provide the resources that we can, and we work in a lot of collaboration with One Colorado, Rainbow Alley, some other organizations to provide resources. Yeah. Okay, there's one over here.
Yes.
Sorry, the lights.
Is this on? Yeah. So as American society becomes much more diverse, culturally, religiously, ethnically, racially, how are your strategies and tactics adapting to, student populations, let's say, particularly students that come from immigrant families that may not share our liberal values in this respect?
So those changes have happened in our state. I've lived here in Colorado since 2001 and watched it change in significant ways, particularly, and this just comes to mind, in the Greeley community in Weld County and things like that. And those schools and those administrators, the ones that see that and are proactive about that, understand that their schools and their strategies have to evolve, right? And others aren't, and you can see that. I say that mostly because when you create such an environment, students usually excel. And when it's quite disciplinarian, I don't know how to, right? And if that's the only tactic, it'll show up in your school, right? It's not helpful to anyone in your building. So we do adjust. We change our language. We were talking about the evolution of language, working with schools to find out what are your needs specifically. Where are you seeing these kinds of issues? But also children are children in a variety of different ways with a variety of different languages, right? And can come together and can learn from each other in different ways that I think than adults can, right? They have less sensors and want to play and want to be together and learn. And so I think some of those kinds of things are also very universal. And as long as educators and families can communicate in a way that says, this is a safe place, we welcome you, and get connected, because then those conversations that might be harder around behavior or all those kinds of things are easier to have, right? If it's already adversary, that's a harder conversation to have with communities that are new, right? But if they're welcome and connected and attempts are being made to find similarities, the common ground, then you can also have those conversations about things that are hard. So we have lots of different ways to do that. It just depends on how and what folks need. And if we don't have it, we will find other resources in the community to help engage in that conversation. Does that answer your question? Great. Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara. And Tara, don't sit down. One of the key missions of Rotary is to stomp out polio in the world. Africa has just been declared a year free of polio. So we are very proud of that. 2 more countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, and then we will have eradicated polio. Today, in your honor, we will donate money to inoculate 50 children against polio, and with the the donation that the Belinda and Bill Gates Foundation gives us 2 for 1, 150 children will be inoculated.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you.